Is it on?
Mm-hmm.
We're live?
That's what this is.
You too? So it's necessary for us to more or less enter into this with the open mind. And in fact, it's necessary for everything we do, throughout the day, enter it, with an open mind. Because as we come into things, if our preconceived ideas are filling up our mind, it's like you say with a cup. If the cup is filled, you can't pour anything into it. So you have an empty cup, you can fill the cup up. For our minds to open up allows for us to listen to something. Okay, so now we're listening to some new things, some very strange type of breathing, because we've never done this before. So we enter it with an open mind. If we have concepts about it and we don't even try it, then we don't have the possibility of seeing whether it's something that can be useful for us. So we need to enter with an open mind. But it's very interesting because Buddha, was this guy that was existing 2,600 years ago in India. And what he said is anything I say, don't believe it. You need to check it. The same way as you would check if you were a jeweler and somebody gave you some gold, you would test it with whatever it was. If you had chemicals or heat or whatever it is, you test the gold to make sure that it's genuine. Now, there's a lot of things out there these days. There's a lot of people doing lots of things these days. Some reason, this guy from 2,600 years ago, with kind of like no clothes on, sitting out there in India, had some ideas that have lasted all this time. They've withstood the scrutiny of whether what was being said is something that's genuine or not. So what Buddha's basically saying is that we don't question enough, in a sense. We're not questioning what's going on in our mind, what's going on within our thoughts, what's going on within our body, and we just believe whatever that conditioning is for us. So this questioning mind, basically, you need to come in with that open mind to listen to something else, but you also need to listen and make sure that what is being said is something that's very genuine, that it means something, because now they call what he was doing Buddhism, because Buddha lived back then. But Buddha didn't come out and say, okay, this is Buddhism. He spoke truth. He basically said what's taking place, within our life, within our minds, within our body, and how do you deal with it? And so, because of that, it's very important. The other thing that Buddha said, which is very important, is he said, don't just listen to my words, but try to hear the meaning behind the words. Even in our daily life, when we try to communicate with each other, because we're all different people, in order to communicate, we need to try to understand what is that person saying. If we don't try to understand what's behind the words, we grab onto a word and we get angry and we have all kind of emotions that take place. Okay? So the fact is that it's extremely, extremely important, to try to know what is the meaning behind the word. The words cannot express what's being expressed. In fact, there was a saying that even Buddha's tongue was too weak to talk about absolute truth, to explain it. He said, I found this wonderful thing. But he went back and went into meditation because words themselves are only trying to get us to this understanding. So we need to try to, again, what's this person saying? What's he really trying to communicate? What's the meaning behind it? If it's something that's based upon truth, then it's going to have some positive effects upon our life, some positive effects. We have the key every single moment of our life in order to feel fully awake, fully happy, fully open. But instead, we keep on fighting, grasping for something else. Every moment, every moment. So we keep looking for something where it's right with us every moment, actually. So when we try to grab even if we grab it for a moment, then the next moment we try to grab it back again, cling at it. So we need very much to be able to understand the meanings of things and begin to work with ourselves and the energy around us. Actually, everything is, I'll say something to you right now, everything's okay. We're all okay, okay? There's nothing that we cannot deal with. Everything can be dealt with because the wisdom within our mind can deal with it. So, because Buddha couldn't talk, about absolute truth at that particular time, he had to start to explain some other things. So at first, of course, he begins to explain about, what is known as truth of suffering, truth of discontent. So when we're just sitting here right now and we're pretty relaxed, we think we're content. But all of a sudden, if we try to, meditating, we don't have to sit down, we don't have to cross our legs, we just sit there and we begin to contemplate, we go in quietly, we see there's a constant battle going on. There's a pulling and pushing taking place every second, trying to push something away from me, trying to push this moment away from me, find the next moment that's going to have the answers to my life, and grab at that. Every single moment that battle is going on. So to be able to understand that becomes very, very difficult. So by showing that the truth is that all of us have this what's known as dissatisfactory state of being because we haven't gone beyond. We haven't gone beyond our pain. We haven't gone beyond our suffering and things. We sit there and we wallow in it, basically. And so what becomes extremely, extremely important is that by sitting in the meditation, you sit quietly, and you begin to experience the energies that come up. And if you stop believing what they're telling you, oh yeah, that's pain, this is discontent, and you just look at it, your mind all of a sudden opens. Your mind opens like this space, and it's got room. You find space. You're acknowledging space. You have room for what's going on. And so it's not crowding you. You're not in this continuous battle, fighting, pushing, pulling, going on all the time. You can begin to feel that there's a state of openness and relaxation, within ourselves. So because it's hard to understand all this, but Buddha will end up giving some type of other truths. This is not something that Buddha's got a copyright on and they call Buddhism. These are truths because they're truths. You don't have to worry if we're labeling it or not labeling it. We're already labeling too much. What are those little yellow things we get now? Those sticky things that you write things down. Post-its. These Post-its. We've got 3 million Post-its going on inside of ourselves. This is that, da 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 da, And so we're labeling without looking and seeing, is that true or not true? Is this really pain? Or wait, maybe it's bliss. I don't know. Maybe we need to look at it in a little different way. If we look at it from a different angle. So when Buddha teaches the truths, he'll teach something very easy to understand. Easy word, impermanence. Impermanence. Impermanence means everything around us is changing moment by moment. In fact, within the truth of suffering, when Buddha teaches that it involves from the moment we're born, we're already moving toward the end of that life. That means everything is conditioned. Everything that has a cause and condition has an end time. So this body's going to have an end time. This thank God for you, this talk will have an end time. Everything more or less comes to an end at a certain point. But what is our mind doing? Our mind overestimates different things and grasps at it as being permanent. So we don't fully enjoy what we deal with on a moment-to-moment basis because we're too busy trying to, all of a sudden like become Velcro, become sticky to whatever it is we're attached to. We can fully appreciate and enjoy our homes, our cars. There's no problem with material things. There's no problem with our relationships. The problem is, how are we dealing with them? If we deal with them understanding impermanence, understanding how things are always changing. It brought back a thing because Tibetans like to use for impermanence. The Tibetan word is mitakpa, so they go like this, mitakpa, because the moment, there's nothing standing still for a moment. Everything is in a state of flux. Everything, us, our being, our thoughts, everything is within a state of flux at all times. But our mind is overestimating and grasping at things, external things, to be permanent. And so because we grasp at that and say, I have to have this, then we're all the time having to defend it. So if somebody tries to take that or harms it, or somebody hits our car, then our minds, immediately have aversion, to the situation, aversion to the person, because of that attachment. When we understand this is the nature of life, is this change, continuous change going on. So I was going to tell you that the lamas, when they get up to give teachings, quite often they're up in a little bit higher spot to get to all the people, and so many of them, they snap their finger when they get up, to give that teaching. That's to remind them quickly, don't become attached to this. Don't think you're something special, Impermanence, understand the impermanence of the situation and things. So there's different things to all of a sudden, alert us and awaken us to what's going on with life. I know I've told some of you the story before, but I have to tell it again because it had a profound mental, physical effect on me that, many years ago, before I went to, went out by the lamas and made it out to India and Tibet and Nepal, I was living in, in San Francisco. And I didn't know that much then, but back in those days, maybe some of you have heard it, back in especially the 60s, one of the biggest spots was Haight-Ashbury. So it turns out that we ended up finding this place we were living was in Haight-Ashbury, but then we wanted to move away. Well, Haight-Ashbury was like where all of the hippies were, where all the drugs were taking place, where everything was. And so we were going to be moving, me and the person I was with, and so I had two bikes. I had the two bikes inside the car, a little television, a stereo, all my personal things, and we were out that night to maybe 2-3 in the morning. Came back, went to sleep. In the morning, went out to go get the van, and the van's gone. My van was gone with everything inside of it. All the physical things, because we were moving that day from there, gone. We had it already moved inside there. So anyway, I felt so much relief for some strange reason. The relief of not having those items. So as you probably, when you look and you see the lamas, the monks, the ones that become, decide to go into monasteries. You don't have to go into a monastery. You can, there's many different ways you do your practices, but many of them that go into monasteries, that's because they've come to a realization of renunciation of the material things, and they symbolize it by cutting their hair off, and they change their names. And so the reason, the reason for that is that by not having all this clutter that you're worrying about protecting and collecting more, your mind stays freer. So this is more or less a what happens by understanding of impermanence and not over grasping on all these particular things that we're going after. Because what we grasp after, that we're going to say, if I get this, then for sure I'm happy. If I get this house, if I get this, person, if I get whatever this might be, then I will be happy. Well, if that happiness is, mixed in with this grasping, the moment we meet them, the moment whatever we got, there's already a time limit built in there. There's an end of warranty to that situation. That is impermanence. That is change. So when we live in the West, we don't want to see change. We don't want to see, the truths that we can't always stay young. We're going to get older. So you got, birth, sickness, old age, death. So we hide it away in the West. In the East, you go to the East, you go to India, and you look, and the people are being taken pretty much to the areas where they're going to set them on fire and do the cremations outside. And this is going on all the time and every day. And people out there with sickness and leprosy, it's in front of you. So, there's a discussion a little bit about which has more. We would look at it generally, when I say we, living in the West, we would say that it's more painful to live in, Asia, to live within this poverty, amongst all this sickness and death. I think the mental suffering that goes on in the Western world far exceeds most of what's there. Not that they don't have mental suffering, but the mental suffering that we have is far greater than what I saw. I always tell the story of when I used to walk up from Ellie's daughter lived at Bodhanath. She still lives at Bodhanath? So Bodhanath is a big stupa in Kathmandu, and you have to pass that to get to my monastery, to Kopan, walking and then going up the hill, way off. And the little kids, that are out there, and all they have was this like little wheel and a stick, that the stick is kind of shaped like this, because like my fingers can't do it, but it's just a straight stick, and then it hooks, and they just run and make the wheel turn as they run with it, as happy as can be. They don't have Game Boy sitting there, and then when they get tired of Game Boy, then they have the TV, and they've got Netflix, and then they've got this, and then they've got that. Something with just the basic simplicity to just appreciating life, more or less. So within our activity all the time, this fight that goes on, the energy that's always fighting to get away, doesn't allow us to taste the food that we eat. It doesn't allow us to get the nourishment, eating meditation that you can feel it coming from the plate, looking at it, coming into your mouth, feeling that nutrition, feeling that fill your body. That's what food is for nutrition. Taking the breath in, basically. As I said, driving, and not seeing the beauty that's around us because we just are always working. That intellectual mind is going and saying, oh, well, today it's nice, but it was a little warmer yesterday. Comparing it to something else, not dealing with what it is today, in the now, what is taking place, getting full appreciation of our families, of the water that we drink, in order to nourish us. And so, by understanding impermanence and also what Buddha talks about with everything is dependent arising. What does all that mean? That means that when we grasp at something, our mind is malfunctioning. Whatever the program that we stuck inside of ourselves is malfunctioning. Why is it malfunctioning? Because it sees some situation as being existing as it is, the way that we see it. It's absolutely that's good, absolutely that's bad. Everything that comes in through all of our senses, through our ears, through our nose, from our skin, all of our thoughts, all of our feelings, everything that goes through, we see it incorrectly. But if we look at it, we will see that it doesn't last at all. It's impermanent. It's always changing. It's dependent on the moments before. There's a dependent arising. There is nothing there that is absolute except for what our mind labels it. Puts the post-it. We put the post-it on. So we've got lots of post-its out there throughout the universe. That's good post-it. That's a bad one. Like this, like that, don't like. And so what are we doing? We're spending our time and our energy is to rearrange the world around us to try to get all the good post-its. Impossible, can't work. Doesn't work. Why? Because something's going to happen. It's impermanent. It won't last forever. But we think it's going to last forever. And we think it exists there alone, dependent on nothing. It absolutely exists. The world around us does not absolutely exist. The world around us exists relative to the way that we are perceiving it. Our mind still has to perceive it. So you'll read things, you'll hear things where Buddhists will say everything's like an illusion. Not saying it is an illusion, like an illusion. Why is it like an illusion? Because what is an illusion? Illusion is making you see something that's not actually there. If a magician does a magic trick, creates something, he has some ability, some energy to create that magic trick. Things are like a mirage, okay? We drive down the road, and because our mind, our wisdom is usually smart enough to know that that's a mirage caused by conditions, because there's heat in the cement that it touches, it creates an illusion of water. So we don't veer off of the road while we're driving. Our mind has some wisdom there and is able to see it and understand that it's not a permanent type thing, not an absolute type thing that's existing there without us being aware of it. Even with what we do with our practices, even with meditation, to begin with, we need to follow all different instructions, what to do, how to sit, and different things. So I sat for long times at meditation in retreats in full lotus. So I was attached to sitting in full lotus. And up until the time I got a knee operation, I could sit in full lotus. Now my knee is still trying to get more, it's working more toward flexibility again. But my meditation doesn't depend on full lotus. So we become attached to things, to forms, that things have to be this way. So it's not just when we're sitting here meditating, but when we get up and we walk out. What's important is that we carry it with us. There's something called prajnaparamita, which is paramita means gone beyond, and prajna means wisdom. The wisdom gone beyond, and basically that sutra. It's pretty interesting because what it says is, just in this case, form is empty, emptiness is form. They can't be separated. Becoming attached to form, there is no absolute form. It's emptiness within it. I'm not going to go off on that. That's why I said Buddha didn't want to talk on it. I'm just going to talk about conditions at this time. Impermanence. Understanding that what we feel, what we're experiencing at any time, is only a brief moment. It will end because it had a cause. The storms outside look terrible. I'm sure if we were down there in the Carolinas or in Florida, when the hurricane hits, we sit there thinking this is never going to end, because of course time doesn't exist either. It's relative. So relative to being stuck inside that, the few hours that were within that, or the hour, has the feeling of days because of the perception of mind, the perception of our mind. If our mind is awake and deals with the situation, we're there, we're stuck with it, how do we deal with it? Do we understand that this situation had a cause and condition? The winds are blowing and this is happening, and at a certain point that's going to dissipate. It's going to blow off somewhere else and it's going to finally dissipate. So when Buddha's teaching something, he's not teaching it because it's based on him. Forget about that. He's teaching what is the truth, what is the realities, for ourselves. And so when we begin to understand, when our mind is not malfunctioning, when there's not thoughts that are incorrectly, we sit here, we think, oh, we don't do that. Look, all we have to do is look at ourselves at any time. That's why I said, you self-inspect. You take a look and see what is going on. When you look at something, you're looking at something as being absolutely bad. There is nothing that we perceive through our mind, through our eyes, through our ears, that is absolute. When our eye consciousness, for just a brief moment, sees something, it just sees it. The mind after that then puts the post-it up, labels it beauty, ugly, and then grasps after it, pushes it away. Push, pull, push, pull, push, pull, going on. We get exhausted. We're exhausted because there's internal battle taking place all the time, which is based on illusion. Even the internal battle is impermanent and isn't really there. It's just our mind lying to us. It's distorting a situation. So the eye consciousness, when it sees the trees or it sees the flowers, it just sees them. Then we go on to say, oh, nice, beautiful, this. Oh, I saw these other flowers the other day were a little bit nicer looking like this. And we begin to compare, and we got a bunch of complications that begin to go on. Everything around us, everything within us is of the nature of non-duality. We have created the duality. But the problem with why just the mind alone can't do like it does with the mirage sometimes, if the emotions are too strong because we've built up such strong aversion to certain people, certain situations, or such strong grasping toward some others, we basically are not in touch with ourselves. We're not feeling the space, and so it more or less takes control of us. So we need to sit sometimes there and question what's going on. Take a breath. If you know a mantra, say a mantra. If you don't know a whole mantra, you can do any one. Om or Ah. Say Ah is the sound of the universe. It's the first sound a baby makes. If you're sitting there and the traffic is bad and it's beginning to tighten up, just letting your mind becomes like space as it's gone out. It's got room for what's taking place. It's not crowding us. It's not lying to us, telling us that this situation absolutely has to be bad. It's a conditioned experience. It's conditioned upon how we deal with it, how we relate to it. So when we begin to go back and question things that are taking place, we start to find the true inner wisdom that exists within ourselves in order to deal with things. That becomes pure view. Our views become very pure. So we do some of these things. We do these breathing things, and of course many of them, we do yoga. So of course, yoga is an interesting word. The Tibetan word for yoga has a little different meaning to the way that a lot of people, especially the physical yoga. Yoga, we sometimes think of as kind of like to become one with. So you can't really separate, to become one with. But in higher forms of Buddhism, especially Tibetan Buddhism, especially in Dzogchen, they're not going to say yoga, they'll use non-duality, because there never was a division. There never was a duality. That duality is an illusion. So when we begin, to reprogram ourselves in a sense of no programming at all, our minds begin to find space and energy to work with ourselves. That's why I said when we're sitting in our meditations, or even if you're doing yoga, trying to do a yoga pose, don't try to sit there and fight with whatever that position is. Just be where you are now. Feel that position where it is, right where it is. And when you quiet your mind down, you'll begin to feel a more subtle type of pulling that's still going on. And you begin to unwind all of this. You'll begin to find that the answers to our situations, lie within ourselves. So when we begin to see the types of confusion that lives within us, that we've kind of created, that's where we begin to develop compassion for ourselves. When we develop compassion for ourselves, for seeing where we are with what's going on, that's when it begins to allow us to go beyond ourselves, to go beyond the self-cherishing, the ego grasping, and we can begin to feel others. So going back to the beginning of, what is the meaning behind the words, we begin to communicate because we hear what somebody is trying to say. That's an old kind of hippie thing almost, I think. I hear you. Really means, is your mind connecting? Is your mind connecting up? Are you getting what's really being kind of more or less indicated to you? Because all that people can do is indicate something to you. Whether you understand what's being indicated has to do with our ability to begin to listen and understand and feel. Once we begin to feel somebody else's pain, we start to have room for understanding. That they don't understand how to get out of this, how to unwind. The answer lies within ourselves now and every moment. Yet we don't look for it. So the actual path itself is the path that begins to do things in a correct manner. Because at first we don't know. So from that standpoint, we learn to try to become, maybe become generous. And so we try to share our concern, our love for others. If people need things, if they need food or whatever it might be. But what we're working toward is what's known as, in that particular case, is the number one, the first paramita. Paramita, again, meaning beyond. Paramita of giving. So if you give your time to somebody, if you help somebody, if you teach somebody, if there's strings attached to it, it muddies it. Doesn't mean it's bad karma. It's still good karma. It's better to give than to take and steal from others. So by giving, you're opening your mind up. But you want to be working toward the paramita, means going beyond, because there's no ego, there's no difference between you and these others around you. You can feel their pain the same as you'd be feeling your own. Then you're giving something to them, and it's not that you're necessarily looking for, somebody's going to recognize what a great person I am, how generous I am, or how I do these things for others. You just do it freely because it's the thing to do, the right thing to do. And so this sets you basically on the path that begins to let your mind become, the atmosphere of your mind becomes more relaxed. Why does it become relaxed? Because what's not relaxed is self-grasping. So you're not grasping at self. You've gone beyond self, and you're feeling what somebody else needs, what somebody wants. And so because of that, You begin to do those things. That's what's called accumulation of a merit. Kind of like, we collect money in the bank account. We do positive things. You hear about what's positive karma. Karma is not Buddha sitting up in the sky saying, oh, that's good, that's bad, that's pure, that's a little bit gray, it's not perfect, and passing on. No, no, no. What is karma? Karma is the simple law of energy, cause and effect. If our mind is not being deceitful to ourselves and to others, is being open, then our mind itself is opening, and that's positive karma. If it's not, it's grasping more itself, it's creating more karmic patterns of who we think we are and what we think the world is, and that means that we don't have control. We are within what's known, you've heard the word samsara before? Okay, so samsara, most people have heard nirvana. So samsara and nirvana are opposites. Nirvana is beyond suffering, is beyond pain and suffering. So in other words, if you're looking as a Buddhist, you might be looking to go to nirvana, beyond pain and suffering. Actually, many of the Buddhists go beyond that, but go to do it for all living beings. But samsara is the recycling of our fixed personality. There's no real fixed personality there, but we've put that label on, this is me, and because this is me, this is the world I need around me. And if I don't come in contact, if I don't get all those Post-its, that are the good ones, then I'm going to have aversion to what's coming up. But if I get the ones I want, I'm not going to have aversion, but I'm going to grasp at them. And I'm going to believe that our mind's going to overestimate, think that they can bring permanent happiness. Permanent happiness lives within the mind that goes beyond samsara and nirvana. Samsara and nirvana are dependent on each other. They don't exist on their own either. They are dependent on each other. Non-duality goes beyond them. And so once we begin to deal in a world around us in this type of free fashion, then our energy, becomes very different within ourselves. It is interesting. I was looking, you take a look at a child, 4 years old, 5 years old, and they sit down, and most of the time, body is so relaxed. They can sit in any position. And then we sit there, oh, I wish I could do that. Well, actually, we can do that. Why are we not doing it? It's not because we got older. That's not what it is. We've built up over the years so many conflicts that it's manifesting throughout our whole body. That's why before we did some of those exercises, some of the self-massage to open up, because because sometimes we have to go about it from the physical standpoint, because we have a physical part of us, we have a mental part of us, and we have an energetic part of us, which is our voice, our sound, our breathing, what we call lung energy, or you hear chi and ki, depending on which system you use. This stuff gets locked up inside of us. It stops flowing. When everything is flowing properly and energy is moving from organ to organ properly, that's what's known as health. That's balance. So we hold this stuff inside of ourselves. Funny thing is, if we sit down and let's say we do something, we say, okay, I'm gonna put my leg out over here, and now I'm just gonna go like this. Okay, I can feel something right here. I feel something inside my leg. I feel some stuff back over here. That child goes and the head comes right down to the knee. But why am I stuck over here? But if I sit there for a while and I invite that energy in, because it's in anyway, it's us. It's not separate from us, it's us. If you just sit there, all of a sudden, oh my God, yeah, it's just on its own, you begin to feel it release, and because it relaxes, it releases, you're able to move down, and there is nothing holding you back any longer. because we stay fixed, in these particular types of world, that we live in, we've built all this up. So this is just on the physical level. On the mental level, we're mental messes. By the time we get older, we've created so much confusion because we've never seen anything that's the truth. We don't want to experience the truth. We can't experience the truth because if we experience the truth, this built-up fake world within us is going to revolt because it's trying all the time to not allow us out. And it's not something that's actually living. All it is become an energy. It's become a mental energy and a physical energy that has been built up. So the ability to see through it, to see things like an illusion, starts to become a little bit more apparent. And so, it can begin to open up, open up our minds, open up our chest, opens up. Everything begins to open more or less. Why? Because we're becoming in tune with what we really are. And what we really are is none of those, is empty, is devoid of any of those misconceptions. It's devoid of any of these different things that we've carried on and created these post-its. I am this, so that's like that. And so once we see through it, it's kind of like there's nowhere for that ignorance and ego to go anymore. It just disappears and it becomes like space. It's just not really there. So you have that experience. You understand that something's moving, changing, and begin to work with it and understand that you've created this whole thing, but since you've created it, the ability to let go of it, okay? Because of understanding, there is no permanent me in that particular fashion. There's no permanent world living out there that lives without some kind of condition. Everything that we look at and think, okay, absolutely, that's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen, is dependent on our mind doing that. Anyway, I won't go too much further into that right now, so maybe we can leave that for now, and maybe if you have questions or doubts about anything I said, we can talk about it. Feel free to ask. If you don't, we can stop. You're good?
But how Buddhists explain how human is created? So that's exactly the eyes.
How eyes in this you're talking?
Yeah. The body, because.
Yeah. So basically, the Buddhist view of the world is not of an outside energy type of somebody as a creator. It's not like in Judaism and Christianity, of a God creating two eyes and a face. I mean, I always say that we look and we draw and we build up our concepts of what looks nice with two eyes, a nose, and a face. But if somebody comes down from another planet, they might come with 5 eyes. I don't know, come from somewhere else, and it doesn't look so good what we look at. Maybe after a while we look at them and we find something that looks good with them. But what creates that is more or less the energy, the physical energy. So our karma is kind of what we create, and we have what's called, let's see, what's the best word for it? It's common karma, in the sense that, we've created, like the human race has created a type of common karma of coming back as the physical body, taking place within a particular shape. That's, I don't think we look like we did years ago. I look back and I see people, even from when I was young, and people look different. You go way back and people look different and things. So, that energy, the genes, the different things end up changing throughout times. That's all physical karma, basically. That's all has to do with what takes place on the physical level. So as I said, we have the mind, which is actually formless. It's not the brain, which people think, oh, my brain's this or that. Well, the brain, we're touched to the brain, so if we damage our brain, it's going to have some effect on us. But the truth of the matter is the mind is formless. The energy level within us is very, very subtle. And the physical level is also very, well, what we see is everything is solid. And things are not solid. Form, if you actually looked at it, and if our mind had the ability to slow down, you'd begin to just see colors. It becomes very, very, very subtle in a sense. So on the gross level, the world around us appears to be something existing on its own and being very, very solid, but it's not solid. It's got very, very subtle levels. And if you go to look within a wall that looks solid, basically, there's space inside that wall at places. There's no fixed just wall sitting there that exists on its own, not dependent on, in this case, let's say if it was built on water and cement being put together, and it's becoming a grosser form, but it's basically it's made up of different parts. So as we were talking before, even in the Western world, they look and they understand that the smallest particles now, you cannot find one that exists on its own. The smallest particle is made up of more particles. Those particles are made up of particles. So this is energy, that more or less moves around. So whether it's our physical body or the world around us. So what do you want, a Big Bang Theory? There's this is going to become a little bit harder to understand. Buddhists do not believe that the energy of the mind ever goes away. So that's what in the West we call reincarnation. So when we die, the subtle level of our mind and the energy pass on to what's known as the bardo, the intermediate state, and from there it finds where a husband and wife are together, and then they're put together, and then the mind enters that, and a person is born. People that control that process of being reborn are what's known as in Tibetan tulku, which is incarnate lamas, which have gained the control over their mind to come back to benefit others. They don't need to come back, but they come back for others in order to relieve their pain and suffering, help them, to find their enlightened, their awakened state, within themselves. So what happens in reality is that you can't go back to a time, but just take a moment where, your mind, in a sense, all of a sudden realizes, oh, I'm here. And when you realize, oh, I am here, then you begin to create thoughts, feelings. That's where, we get this, skandhas that are created around us. And so the I that pops up, and because it pops up and it says, hey, it's a little confusing here. I don't know who I am. I don't know what that is. It's almost like you wake up with amnesia. You wake up with amnesia, you don't know your name, you don't even recognize your surroundings. So you don't know who looks good, who looks bad. And then you begin to create. Oh, that looks good if it looks like this, and that looks bad if it looks like that. That smells good, this doesn't. And so this more or less creates the energy and the karma and stuff within ourselves and around, but sorry, that's going off quite a bit on your,
This wheel of life?
The wheel of life is what I said is samsara. So yes, the wheel of life is that, you begin to see that, like if you, I don't know if you have the pictures here with it, but the wheel of life, first you get that feeling of I, and then you get, you also see, the person kind of, what do you call it, beginning to mold something, so creating, form. And then, then it develops into this consciousness. So we create basically this locked-in cycle of energy that this is me and this is, this. And so within the wheel of life, because we're stuck within that, that's what's called being stuck within the chains of karma. So to go beyond the chains of karma means seeing at least on the grosser level, seeing the impermanent nature of things that we're looking at, seeing the dependent arising of the things, because that's what that wheel is. It's the dependent arising of how one thing causes something else to arise, and then that creates form and da da da. So, and so basically, and that in the middle of the wheel of life, there's the rooster, and the snake, and the pig. Okay, so that's symbolic of the three emotions that we grasp onto because of the feeling of I. So, like a snake, it's anger or aversion if there's something we don't like. I don't like the situation, I have aversion, that's the anger. The rooster is kind of like, that's to do with grasping and desire, attachment. And then, of course, the pig, they always talk about is to do with the one that's the real culprit of the whole thing. It's translated into ignorance, but what it really means is not only not knowing, but knowing wrongly. So when we know wrongly what we're, who we are and what we're looking at, we create this pattern over and over and over again. And so as long as we keep recycling it, we're stuck within it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Maybe a little confusing for some of you, but it doesn't matter what you understand, what you get. At some points, other times, stuff. All of this is good in the sense that it's like planting seeds out in the field. You plant the seeds, you might be driving, and all of a sudden, like that, you understand something. Buddha's thing was an interesting one. I always like the story about the guy that he had living in a temple that couldn't understand or listen to all the different things that was being done. So he told him, okay, the only thing you're going to do in the temple there is you're going to go with the brush, with the broom, and you're going to say, sweep the dirt, clean the dust. Sweep the dirt, clean the dust. He kept doing it and doing and doing. And all of a sudden, after some years, he had a realization. The dirt is the dirt on his mind. The dust is the subtle dirt on his mind, the subtle delusions and emotions on his mind. And he woke up. So it wasn't through practices, but through this. And then of course there's numerous stories of the great yogis that put some of their students through kind of crazy things, but sometimes then just a slap in the face, will awaken. Because if you have the skillful means of a teacher like that, they know what to do to try to keep on awakening somebody on the path. But on the beginning levels, we just learn what is good karma, what's bad karma. It's good to give, it's good to have patience, it's good to have loving kindness, create positive karma, even if they're a little bit impure to begin with, and it's not as pure as it should be. It still starts to allow you to be on the path and begin to open up to it all. Anything else? Karina, anything?
Do you have any question?
Okay, thank you. We can dedicate this energy for the bringing our minds to their true nature, the awakened state, in order to help others that not only are having different physical pain, having some mental pain, but also have the causes for continuous pain and suffering, how to reach them. Dedicate that this energy goes toward awakening us and awakening all living beings. Thank you.